Hi all. Today we're going to have a look at a Ben Shapiro clip where he's asked about whether he believes free will is an illusion. Let's get right into it.
So you state in an article titled, quote, "Why Atheism is Morally Bankrupt," that, quote, "without God, there is no capacity for free will." And you repeat the sentiment multiple times.
Atheism is morally bankrupt because it doesn't deal with morality. It deals with whether or not you believe in a god. That doesn't mean that atheists can't form moral beliefs or behave ethically.
Yes.
You consistently claim to be able to pose secular arguments to support any of your claims, but it seems that your belief in free will is entirely rooted in religious argument, and you seem to indicate that if you had to take a secular view on the topic of free will, you would be forced to take a determinist position. Considering that the free will topic is at the core of the justice system, it seems to me that your arguments in favor of retributive justice are solely supported by religious arguments. Can you pose a secular argument in favor of free will?
Sure. I mean, I think that most atheists believe in free will and disagree with my central premise.
Well, some atheists would agree with having free will and others would not. But really, that's immaterial to the actual question. So please elaborate, Mr. Shapiro.
So if I want to play atheist, I would say that there is a secular argument in favor of free will. As a religious person, I don't think it's a particularly compelling one.
Okay. Why?
So in other words, the point that I'm making here is that you're right. Free will is at the center of the criminal justice system. Yeah. I believe that the argument in favor of free will has to rest on supernatural premises.
Why would it have to rest on supernatural premises, when everything we've discovered via the scientific method points towards natural explanations for our actions?
Because otherwise, what you're basically saying is that human beings are a combination of their genetics and their environment, and if we just had a giant machine and we could pour all that information into a machine, then I could predict with perfect certainty what you were going to say next. Right? As it is, my machine's great. I can mostly predict what you're going to say next. But if I had all that information, then I could perfectly predict that, and then you wouldn't have any personal responsibility.
Your argument basically boils down to you don't like the implications and therefore it must be wrong. This has nothing to do with your feelings. You might not like the conclusion you've come to, but that doesn't mean it's incorrect or that a supernatural agency must be in control of our physical bodies. Second, if you can mostly predict someone's actions already, then that anecdotally points to predictive behavior or patterns of behavior that are common in certain environments and conditions. This is exactly what you'd expect if free will were an illusion. As for the machine you referenced that would be able to accurately predict future actions, scientists are already able to predict your actions seconds before you become aware of your decisions to act. For example, you may think you decided to read this story, but in fact, your brain made the decision long before you knew about it. In a study published Sunday in Nature Neuroscience, researchers using brain scanners could predict people's decisions 7 seconds before the test subjects were even aware of making them. The decision studied, whether to hit a button with one's left hand or right hand, may not be representative of complicated choices that are more integrally tied to our sense of self-direction. Regardless, the findings raise profound questions about the nature of self and autonomy. How free is our will? Is conscious choice just an illusion? Your decisions are strongly prepared by brain activity. By the time consciousness kicks in, most of the work has already been done.
And I haven't heard a great argument from atheists about why that's the case. Now,
well, I haven't heard any argument from you that shows an invisible supernatural spirit determines our actions, yet you have said this is what you believe. For example, scientists can already look at the parts of your brain that are active when making moral decisions. While psychopaths don't sit still for science and ordinary people can't be made to think so savagely, nearly anyone can imagine what it would be like to commit the kind of legal homicide that occurs in war. To study how the brain reacts when it confronts such murder made moral, psychologist Pascal Molenbergs of Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, recruited 48 subjects and asked them to submit to functional magnetic resonance imaging, which could scan their brains while they watched 3 different scenarios on video loops. In one, a soldier would be killing an enemy soldier. In the next, the soldier would be killing a civilian. And in the last, used as a control, the soldier would shoot a weapon but hit no one. In all cases, the subjects saw the scene from the shooter's point of view. At the end of each loop, they were asked, "Who did you shoot?" and were required to press one of the 3 buttons on a keypad, indicating soldier, civilian, or no one, a way of making certain they knew what they'd done. After the scans, they were asked to rate on a 1 to 7 scale how guilty they felt in each scenario. Even before the study, Molenbergs knew that when he read the scans, he would focus first on the activity in the orbitofrontal cortex, a region of the forebrain that has long been known to be involved with moral sensitivity, moral judgments, and making choices about how to behave. The nearby TPJ also takes on some of this moral load, processing the sense of agency, the act of doing something deliberately and therefore owning the responsibility for it. That doesn't always make much of a difference in the real world. Whether you shoot someone on purpose or the gun goes off accidentally, the victim is still dead. But it makes an enormous difference in how you later reckon with what you've done. There doesn't seem to be a spirit involved with this moral or ethical decision-making. If you want to claim there is, Ben, please explain what function that spirit fulfills and then provide evidence for its existence.
I say that it's a supernatural force. You can believe it's not a supernatural force.
You haven't provided any evidence or reason for me to believe it's a supernatural force.
But I think that you can say from a secular point of view that you can believe free will exists without God existing. I don't think it's a compelling argument, but I think you can do that.
You keep saying you don't think it's a compelling argument, but you never offer a counter-argument. Why isn't it a compelling argument, and why should we accept your version, which includes a supernatural spirit?
And I've argued with secular people without mentioning God in the free will argument all the time. I mean, if you're an atheist, are you an atheist?
Yes.
Okay, so you're an atheist. Do you believe free will exists?
No.
You don't believe free will exists. So you tell me, how does the criminal justice system function?
It functions because we act as if we have free will, which is why some people call it an illusion. It might be a useful illusion, but an illusion all the same.
Yeah, so I would recommend a quarantine theory where you basically view someone as an actor, and so in an example, let's say someone is violent with someone else, you would say, okay, well, as a determinist, I'd say when you make a decision, you could not have chosen otherwise. So I'd view this actor and I'd say, well, you couldn't have chosen otherwise, so I don't hold you morally culpable, but it still tells me a lot about how you're liable to act in the future, and so we're going to treat you as a public health hazard and quarantine.
But that's not
off.
true. I mean,
Personally, I think the idea of retribution for actions, which is what our justice system is built on, is also a deterrent and plays a part in our decision-making. For example, say you're a social worker with a family to support. You want to smoke a bit of weed, but you realize that if you get caught and convicted, you will likely lose your job. Would this play a role in your decision-making? It very well might. So, even if we conclude scientifically that we don't have free will, that doesn't necessarily mean that there would be no use for a punitive justice system.
the problem with that argument is it's not true. If I kill my wife, right, which I'm not going to, I like her. Yeah. If I kill my wife, the chances that I'm going to kill another human being are actually extraordinarily low.
Maybe, but if you were to rewind time to the exact moment when you hypothetically killed your wife, and you changed nothing about the conditions or environment that you found yourself in that exact moment, you would kill your wife again. Rewind again, and you're killing your wife again, and so on. Second, I'm not entirely convinced that once you've killed someone, that you'll be less likely than someone with no prior murders to kill again. I think you have shown the capacity to murder given the right conditions, and given that, you now pose a threat to society, particularly future wives. Now, you can argue that the justice system should be trying to rehabilitate you, and others would argue that you should be killed or punished with incarceration, but that's beside the point when it comes to whether or not you have free will.
Right, there's no, like, people kill people they tend to know. The chances that I'm going to kill a bunch of other people are really, really low. The idea that I'm going to become a serial killer is not really true.
Regardless, you're now going off on a tangent instead of answering his original question or backing up your claims that there is a supernatural aspect to our decision-making.
Plus, I mean, you're actually creating a sort of Millennium Report problem, right? You actually have, what if you just say, you're now doing pre-crime. You're saying you're more likely to commit crime in the future, so we're going to put you in quarantine.
That's what they do now.
The retributive theory of justice is basically this. You deserve to go to prison. And not only do you deserve to go to prison, if we didn't put you in prison, then what you'd end up with is people coming after you to commit revenge on you, and then you'd have a cycle of violence that would actually lead to terrible things. So if you want to argue against free will on the basis that, like, I'm thinking about it on the spot, it's a really interesting question.
What does any of this have to do with whether or not we have free will? You have so far just said supernatural and not offered any evidence for your position. Instead, you've just tried to refute the questioner's ideas about the justice system, which isn't what he originally asked you in the first place.
I suppose I would say this. I suppose that I would say that I believe that in the end, Western civilization is based on a foundation of Judeo-Christian morality that is religious in nature, but I can't just say God.
You missed your hat.
What were we talking about?
Like, when people ask me a question, I can't just say God if I want to have the argument. Maybe at the root, if you say free will, when you get down to the root argument of a couple of these major things, then I will have to say God.
The root would be your basic premise, so that is what you would have to defend, and so far, you're not doing a very good job of it.
But I think that the vast majority of political argument, it's important not to just cite to the Bible or to a deity.
All right, thank you.
Just cite supernatural like you've done here today. Look, I think whether or not we have free will is an interesting subject. Personally, I don't think we have free will. I think there is a small amount of uncertainty when we take into account the quantum, but our decisions are based on the material and not the supernatural. I liked how Pinkerton explained free will in this clip.
I don't believe there's such a thing as free will in the sense of a ghost in the machine, a spirit or soul that somehow reads the TV screen of the senses and pushes buttons and pulls levers of behavior. There's no sense that we can make of that. I think our behavior is the product of physical processes in the brain. On the other hand, when you have a brain that consists of 100 billion neurons connected by 100 trillion synapses, there is a vast amount of complexity that means that human choices will not be predictable in any simple way from the stimuli that have impinged on it beforehand.
Anyhow, thanks for watching, and let me know in the comment section whether you believe in free will. Take care and cheers.